I'm part of the wider team who are organizing these series of webinars. And for those who can't see me, I'm a white man with a beard and light brown colored hair with glasses. And my accent is a strange Australian accent. But in fact, I'm sitting in very warm London right now. So a warm welcome to you all. So again, a warm welcome to this, the Youth Disability Advocacy and Research Network series of webinars. We're really delighted to have you here. This network is supported by the Arts and Humanities Research Council and is being led and coordinated by a range of organizations, including Bournemouth University, Ad International, American University, Washington, and many others, including contributions from IFES, our wonderful presenters today. So today's topic, I think, is a fantastic one for us to focus on, and it is focusing on leveraging social media for disability rights advocacy. We've had a range of sessions during this webinar series that have touched on or talked about some uses of social media as part of advocacy campaigns, media campaigns, or even in the representation of persons with disability in the media. But I think it's fantastic that we've got two experts with us today to talk a bit about how we can powerfully use social media to support advocacy and call for greater rights for persons with disability. So really excited to have this session today, and I'm sure all of you use social media in some way. So great to think creatively and innovatively about how we can really direct that towards our advocacy efforts. So for those who have been in previous sessions, hopefully the presenters today are not strangers to you, but for anyone who is new to this, let me just please give first a quick introduction to our two wonderful speakers today. With us, we have Ashley Law, who is the Youth Engagement Specialist at the International Foundation for Electoral Systems, or IFES, where she provides technical support to design and deliver tailored programming to promote young people's civic engagement and political participation. She's previously worked as a program officer for IFES's Asia Pacific team, managing projects in the autonomous region of Bougainville in Papua New Guinea, and in Bangladesh, working with election management bodies to hold inclusive elections, increase youth participation, and partner with universities on civic engagement initiatives. You're so welcome, Ashley. And also today we'll be hearing from Sarah Timrek, who's a youth engagement program officer also at IFES, where she helps design programming that is youth-led, youth-informed, and youth-serving. What a great three. Previously, she worked on IFES's Middle East and North Africa portfolio, supporting projects in Tunisia and Libya that partnered with civil society and government stakeholders across the electoral cycle. And just as a reminder for those who are just joining us, Sarah and Ashley today from IFES will be talking about leveraging social media for disability rights advocacy. As always, before I pass over to Ashley and Sarah, a quick few reminders on our housekeeping for today. Please, if you can keep your microphones switched off while the presenters are speaking. Of course, if you wanted to ask a question, please use the raise hand option, or you could at that point turn your microphone on to ask a question, but otherwise please keep your microphone switched off. As I mentioned, you can feel free to use the raise hand option in the chat, or just put the chat box and put a question into there, or through the chat you could mention you would like to ask a question. Certainly I know Ashley and Sarah and all of us welcome as much engagement as possible, so please, probably easiest to use the chat function and write your questions there, but at any time if you want to switch on your microphone and ask a question as well, please do so. So with that, again, a warm welcome to all of you to this wider webinar series again, and over to you, Ashley and Sarah.
Wonderful. Thank you, Blaise, so much for the introduction and starting us off today, and welcome everyone. Again, this is Sarah Timrek with IFES. So we're gonna start. I see everyone's introducing themselves in the chat, which please continue to do so as you join. And also please feel free to share what you're interested in learning today. We certainly encourage your active and engaged participation. So with that, I'm gonna share my screen. All right, and again, we will be talking about advancing your advocacy through social media for digital advocacy. That will be our focus today. So please feel free to ask any questions in the chat or share your thoughts. But to start, we're going to actually start with a little quiz. I promise there's no right or wrong answers, and it won't be graded, but we want to start with a quiz about what type of advocate are you? And I'll be reading the questions so we can start to decide what type of advocate you are and how this can inform your advocacy efforts moving forward. So I'll be reading each question out loud. We will also be dropping them in the chat. While I read the questions out loud, please feel free to keep track of your answers on a piece of paper or on your own phone or computer, and then we'll discuss the answers afterwards. So I will read the questions, and please feel free to just keep track of your answers as we go along. All right, so the first question for our quiz: what type of advocate are you? My advocacy is going to influence: A, is the public beyond my community. B, is people in my community. C, is government stakeholders. And D, is all the above. So I'll read that question one more time. And I want you to all think about how this applies to your own efforts. My advocacy is going to include: A, the public beyond my community. B, people in my community. C, government stakeholders. Or D, all the above. So just keep track of your answers on your own piece of paper or on your phone or computer. All right, so the second question: the people who I want to influence. A, use the internet regularly. B, have access to the internet but do not use it regularly. C, do not have access to the internet. Or D, all of the above. So the people who I want to influence: A, use the internet regularly. B, have access to the internet but do not use it regularly. C, do not have access to the internet. Or D, all of the above. So continue to keep track of your answers. Let's go to question 3. My advocacy targets are most engaged by: A, community activism on a specific topic, such as climate change. B, pop culture, movies and music. C, personal stories and testimonials. Or D, legal arguments. So again, question 3, my advocacy targets are most engaged by: A, community activism on a specific topic, such as climate change. B, pop culture, movies and music. C, personal stories and testimonials. Or D, legal arguments. So those are the first 3 questions. Continue to keep track of your answers as we go on to the second set of questions. And again, you can find all of these questions in the chat. Question 4, my stakeholders gather their information from: A, traditional media such as TV, radio, and newspapers. B, social media and online sources. C, organizations and official sources such as government newsletters. Or D, all of the above. And again, the question is: my stakeholders get their information from: A, traditional media such as TV, radio, and newspapers. B, social media and online sources. C, organizations and official sources such as government newsletters. Or D, all of the above. And finally, or sorry, not finally, question number 5. As a result of my advocacy, I want A, more people to know about my issue and share it with their networks. So building networks. B, new and current supporters to feel energized about my issue. So a call to action. C, government stakeholders to take action, such as informing or influencing. Or D, all of the above. So again, number 5, as a result of my advocacy, I want A, more people to know about my issue and share it with their networks. So building networks. B, new and current supporters to feel energized about my issue, a call to action. C, government stakeholders to take action to inform and influence. Or D, all of the above. And I believe finally, question 6, on a scale of not comfortable at all to very comfortable, this is how I feel about using social media. A, very comfortable. I want social media to be the core of my campaign. B, comfortable. I want social media to be a large part of my campaign, but may also engage stakeholders in other ways. C, not comfortable. I do not want social media to be a big part of my campaign, if at all. And D, somewhat comfortable. I want to learn more about how to use social media. And to read number 6 one more time, on a scale of not comfortable at all to very comfortable, this is how I feel about using social media. A, very comfortable. I want social media to be the core of my campaign. B, comfortable. I want social media to be a large part of my campaign, but may also engage stakeholders in other ways. C, not comfortable. I do not want to use social media, or I do not want social media to be a big part of my campaign, if at all. And D, somewhat comfortable. I want to learn more about how to use social media. So I'm going to take a second and let you all think about your answers. And in the chat, you can drop if you had mostly A's, mostly B's, mostly C's, or mostly D's. I'm seeing some people dropping their answers in the chat. So just if you want to write, if you had mostly A's as your answers, mostly B's, mostly C's, or mostly D's. I'm seeing a lot of D's, so mostly D's for Jessica, for Famata, for Alinika, Qasim, lots of D's. Anyone mostly A's, B's, C's, or more people who are mostly B's? Mostly B's, okay, some differences. Nice, all right. Well, you're probably wondering what this all means. And so I'm going to share that with you now. So when we think about advocates and different types of advocates, we can kind of break them into these 4 different types. So if you got mostly A's, and maybe some of you who haven't dropped your answers into the chat had mostly A's, you would be a network builder. So you're somebody who spreads the word about your cause and you get anyone and everyone involved. So you might be interested in creating a strategy to get new followers. You might want to develop a hashtag on your issue. You might be someone who wants to publish online articles. So if you got mostly A's, you're considered a network builder. I saw that someone was mostly B's. So if you're mostly B's, you would be a community engager. You want to tell stories in creative ways, and you might use formats like videos, photography, maybe even podcasts. So you're looking at making creative arts digital and telling your story in a creative way. If you were mostly C's, you would be called a grassroots organizer. So you want government stakeholders to take action on your topic, and you might be in touch with them directly. You might be engaging with government officials online. And finally, as many of you said you were mostly D's, you are considered a traditional advocate. So you want to increase your follower base, you want to influence government stakeholders, you are likely to use a mix of online and offline approaches. And fortunately for all of us today, if you're mostly these, you're also interested in learning about how to use social media more, which is going to be a large part of our discussion. And of course, these topics, these different types are not, exclusive. You might engage government officials sometimes, or use creative arts. You might mix online and offline approaches, but this can give you a sense of how you might approach your own advocacy. So thinking about this quiz and just as a starting point today, I'd be curious if you all would be, could drop in the chat or raise your hand and unmute what you might have found helpful about this quiz and these questions, what might have surprised you, and maybe if you learned something new. Maybe I can start by sharing that I think when I took this quiz the first time, I was mostly D's also a traditional advocate, which, I think is interesting because it includes a lot of different online and offline approaches. And as we spoke in our session last time, if any of you were all there, when we think about including a diverse group of people, we want to think about using very different ways of advocacy and engagement. So I thought that was a really interesting thing. But curious what you all found interesting about this quiz, or what might have been helpful to you. Yes, Maureen, I see your hand is raised. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. For me, as we were going through the quiz, I also realized how sometimes we are very ambiguous with the target of reach that we intend to reach in terms of advocacy. Sometimes you're not really clear if it's the government that we want to influence or the people in the grassroots level. So through the quiz, actually, it has brought it clear. Of course, there's an opportunity where you can influence both ends, but it's really important for an advocate to be able to understand exactly who is your target and what really do you want to bring in terms of change with your particular target. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Maureen. And I think you bring up a great point, which is your advocacy, and also Ashley wrote this in the chat, your advocacy target and your advocacy goals may change, and that might change your approach. So when we think about advocacy, we can think of all the different tools and resources we have at our disposal to be effective advocates in, supporting our issue or advancing a cause. So I definitely encourage you all to continue reflecting on this quiz, but in the interest of time, I'm going to pass to Ashley to really dig into digital advocacy and social media for advocacy and start to discuss that.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. And wonderful to see all of your answers in the chat, and Maureen for your insights. Awesome. We really enjoy running this quiz and seeing kind of those who are able to have some sort of, light bulb moments about how they, engage in their advocacy activities and how it relates to your goals. So thank you for participating. So why digital advocacy? I think we're all pretty much aware that over the last decade, we've really seen advocates and CSOs, civil society organizations, and organizations for persons with disabilities, or OPDs, start to add in digital components to their advocacy campaigns, using platforms like social media, messenger apps, virtual meeting spaces, and virtual training platforms. And we know that in the most successful advocacy campaigns, organizations and advocates activate their members, activate their employees to get involved in their campaigns somehow. And the more people involved, the greater the visibility of your efforts across the world, not only in your community, in your country, but in other regions of the world too. So this is why social media can really be a great place for your advocacy campaigns. So to sort of summarize, 3 key reasons we use digital advocacy. 1, to raise awareness. People need to know about our cause in order to care, in order to support it. And social media really provides a great platform to amplify your message. 2, we use digital advocacy to build a network of supporters. Advocacy requires a lot of work, a lot of time, a lot of effort, and supporters can really help maximize your outreach and impact. They can do simple things that take, a couple seconds, right? Like retweet, repost, like one of your posts on social media, all very simple, but truly impactful things that can be done via social media. And then 3rd, mobilize your network to take action. As we know, advocacy is about a deliberate process of influencing decision makers to take a specific action. So calling on your friends, calling on your colleagues, family members, and social networks to take collective action to coordinate messages across social media platforms. I'm curious to hear from you all. What are some of the ways that you've already used social media for advocacy? And I'd be happy for you to unmute or share in the chat even. Dan, I see in the chat you say you've signed a lot of petitions that came to you via social media. That's a wonderful example. And Maureen, I see your hand is raised, so would love to hear from you.
One of the ways that has really worked also here, I'm from Kenya, is where we have petitions being pushed through social media where it reaches most of the people and they're able to sign. And especially this is when we target the government in wanting to see them either change a law that will actually improve some of the services from the government. Thank you.
Yeah, that's excellent. I think, a lot of information comes from social media, either, through advocates like yourselves disseminating it there or other folks. So it's a great platform to really take a specific action like signing a petition. Let's see. I see in the chat, participated in campaigns against FGM, rape, domestic violence. Jessica says she creates informational videos and posts about how to communicate with and about people with disabilities. That's really interesting to hear. Jessica, would you want to unmute, or even Famata, would you want to unmute and share a bit?
Hey, sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Jessica.
Sorry, I have some sort of respiratory thing going on, which is also why I don't have my mic on. Yeah, I work for an organization that directly supports people with disabilities. And so when I took over our social media, I really want to use it to, like, I do things like talk about person first language and things we no longer say anymore. Like, we don't use high and low functioning. We use needs more support, needs less support, or needs specific support, things like that.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful. I appreciate you sharing those examples, Jessica. And I think relates to another comment in the chat about, creating awareness through using social media, videos, pictures, to raise awareness about important issues we care about. And of course, relating back to human rights is incredibly important and something that I think a lot of our advocacy efforts are rooted in. So I think that's wonderful. And Lucy, you write in the chat, I've engaged with different organizations that support persons with disabilities to share thoughts, actions, and simply ideas. Social media is a great place to sort of collectively brainstorm different ideas that you can implement in your advocacy campaigns. So great to hear that. I think one thing that maybe we've touched on a little bit already is social media really has a great ability to connect diverse people, people with diverse identities, different sort of ethnicities, religions, age, gender, sexual orientation, and of course to connect people across geographic locations. So social media really has the ability to bring people together to communicate across dividing lines. And we've seen that government officials and elected leaders are really starting to interact with their constituents through social media, and even through other digital means like video meetings, online events. And because of that, I think, we've seen there's a lot more accessibility to reaching out to our elected leaders and officials through social media. There's a bit more sort of pressure to be responsive on social media. So that can really work to advocates' advantage. And so, social media for advocacy, it really brings new opportunities to empower, to expand and leverage social networks, including your own personal network, as well as the organization's network that you're associated with. And this can extend to other staff, other members of that network, and then even their networks. So it's a fantastic opportunity to just really build up and amplify your campaigns. Social media, it instantly connects you with other advocates, which we've talked about. It provides a place to really amplify your message, and for others to really see and interact with your advocacy efforts. And as I mentioned, it's really a digital community. It's a place for you to connect with lots of different people who care about the same subject. And you can still communicate in a really inclusive way through social media using things like videos, images, captions, links, pictures, alt text, which we'll get into in a little bit. But before we do that, we've got a little bit of groundwork in thinking about why social media is useful, but I think it would be nice if we kind of explore some examples of social media, advocating for a specific cause. So we're going to go through a couple of examples, and what I would love to hear from you all or read in the chat is, what do you think the purpose of this social media post is? And what are the different types of communication techniques that are used, or what could have been used that is not used in the post? So I think, Sarah, if we can go to the first example, I'll go ahead and describe the social media post for you. So on the screen, there is a young man who's holding a microphone, and in quotations is text that reads, "Women in elected offices after the 2023 elections are drastically low. We can do better as a people on the quest to increase women's political representation." And this, I believe, is posted on Twitter. So that was an image that was posted along with the Twitter text, which says, "It is important to introduce inclusive, gender-sensitive leadership pathways to help bring more women into the political arena. Hashtag SAGE, hashtag WDN." So what do you think that this social media post is trying to convey? What's the purpose of this post? Please feel free to unmute and share what you think this post is trying to express. Yeah, I see a couple of ideas in the chat. So looks like positioning, not necessarily a call to action, but informative, so can still be useful for advocacy. The post is about women empowerment, raise awareness that there were fewer women than should have been in an election, or than should have been elected. Anyone else want to unmute and share?
My name is Rajab Pilipili, and I would like to share my view on what is about. Actually, the purpose of the post is to sensitize on the importance of including women in political spaces. It seems women are not well included, or there are no friendly and inclusive pathways for women to engage or to be involved in the political issues. So that is the thing. But also, it advocates now for it argues for the government to see or to come with a strategy, clear strategies for allowing that will help, or that will allow women now to navigate in the political arena with less exclusions in any elections or political incidents. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's excellent, Rajab, and thank you for sharing. What I think is interesting about what you just shared is meanings are not always clear in the text, or a little bit of text can have a big meaning. So what you're sharing of how you interpreted the text, how you interpreted the quote in the photo, clearly goes a bit deeper than just the text that's on the social media post. And I think that's what's really useful about advocacy as well, is a little bit can go a long way and mean a lot, right? So maybe we'll move to the next example. Okay, so for this example, this is, Sarah, I think a Twitter post again? Okay. From actually Guyana Council of Organizations for Persons with Disabilities. And they have posted a video. So the video is depicting a polling station at the moment. And there's a young man who looks to have a disability using a walking cane. And is placing a ballot in a ballot box. And in the corner of the video looks to be a man who is using sign language. And there also seem to be some closed captions available on the video. So the text that was posted along with the video reads, "Inclusion at the polls is key to ensuring full civic participation by all. Hashtag Guyana, hashtag LGE, and hashtag disability rights." So what do you think the purpose of this post is? What action is maybe being hinted at, or what do you think the purpose is? To raise awareness, to build networks, to mobilize action? What does it mean to you, this post? Yes, Jessica, that's a great point. They did a good job of capitalizing the hashtag so that an accessibility reader can properly interpret it. And that's an excellent tip and technique to make sure that our posts are accessible. Does anyone want to unmute and share what they think this social media post is trying to achieve, what the purpose is?
Hello,
Hi.
hello. My name is Timos Kisima. I'm from Dar es Salaam. What I can say is that picture shows that people with disability, if the environment is conducive, can participate in all election issues. Thank you.
Yeah, exactly. And I think to your point, this was raised in the chat at the same time, the post raises awareness that persons with disabilities can vote and should vote, right? And that the LGE, so local government elections, are coming up, and this is where people with disabilities should be participating. And I think that's made even more clear by GCOPD, the Guyana Council of Organization for Persons with Disabilities, with them using the hashtag disability rights. So there's a lot of power with using these hashtags to really help streamline and align what it is that you're advocating for. So maybe we'll go to the third example, and this will be our final example. And let me just describe what is on the screen. So there is an image of a young woman. At the top left is a logo that says "Fight for Right." And the young woman is a deaf student, and there's a quote next to her, the image of her face, that says, "It would be more convenient to receive an air alarm notification via phone vibration or smartwatch to go to shelter in time." And this is also a Twitter post from Fight for Right NGO in Ukraine. And the text on the social media post that goes along with the photo, it says, "The fight for right National Disability Rights Defenders Network's participants had the opportunity to raise urgent issues that still remain unresolved for Ukrainians with disabilities. And what they've done is tagged UN Ukraine. So what do you think this post is trying to convey? What's the message here? Yes, I see your hand is raised. Amagalong, if I said that correctly.
Hi there. I think the post is trying to raise awareness. At the same time, it's actually also trying to mobilize action. I mean, if you're saying it would be more convenient for somebody who is not deaf, they don't know what's convenient for somebody who is. So she's kind of raising awareness that I'm not in a position to hear certain things. So if I could have this thing done for me, I'll be able to it will be convenient for me to have it. So yeah, I think it's raising awareness and then also mobilizing action. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I think those are absolutely two things that are trying to be achieved here. And Tia writes in the chat, it's a report back, which I think is really interesting because social media is a bit of a feedback loop, right? It's a communication tool. So it's a way to communicate what's happening to various elected leaders or to various government officials. And in this case, by tagging the United Nations, they're sharing information at that UN level, at the international level. So I think that's a really great point to raise as well. And maybe just to conclude with these social media posts, thinking back to the 3 examples that we just reviewed and talked through, what are some of the ways that you saw them using inclusive communication techniques or some of the inclusive communication techniques that I described to you? What were some of those? Great, thanks, Jessica. Video with captions, absolutely. Hashtags, great. Visually showing persons with a disability. Large fonts, definitely. These are all wonderful examples. Sarah, maybe could you go back to example 2, please? What about this example? Exactly, the sign language interpreter. And I just wanted to go back to this because I think this is something that we don't always see with advocacy efforts, or simply with any sort of awareness raising educational efforts. The the inclusion of a sign language interpreter. And I feel like this is something that we are starting to see a little bit more, especially from our partners who are with organizations for persons with disabilities or folks who are advocating for persons with disabilities. But I think this is something that we really need to start using more in our advocacy efforts as a way to be more inclusive and to make sure that information is being communicated in multiple ways so that it is accessible to everyone. So thank you, Sarah. We can move forward now. But I hope this was all really helpful to just kind of help you all think through the ways that social media can be really useful for your advocacy efforts, and also to kind of tie back to what we talked about in our previous session about inclusive communication techniques and the importance of using these and applying them to your advocacy efforts on social media. So next, we're going to get into some tips for using social media for digital advocacy. And some of these things, you know, there are things you're probably already doing and probably have already thought through, but I hope there will be some little pieces or nuggets that will help you bolster your social media advocacy efforts. So we'll talk through social media platforms, a little bit more on accessible content, boosting your audience action and engagement, using what we call a network approach, and then, of course, evaluating your success. So to start, let's talk about picking your platform. So it's obviously really important to think strategically about which social media platform or platforms you want to use. Not all social media platforms are used in the same way. For example, some of the platforms may not be used by those who you wish to engage in your social media posts. So you'll want to think about choosing the right platform that your stakeholders engage on, or those that you wish to influence with your efforts. And like I said, not all platforms are the same. So some are better for posting videos or photos and short text, whereas some other ones are better for kind of the lengthier text, engaging in conversations, maybe joining specific groups or starting your own group to advocate for your cause. But what I will say is, I think it's quite useful to be cross-posting your content on multiple platforms. So don't think about this in, you know, a one-size-fits-all, right? It doesn't, and neither do our advocacy efforts. So to be thinking about the ways that you can share your messages on different platforms to help reiterate and amplify your advocacy, that's going to be a really useful approach to making sure your messages are conveyed to a wider audience and raising more awareness with stakeholders who care about the same cause. So creating accessible content, you know, we've talked a little bit about this already, but it really is important to make sure that social media posts are inclusive and accessible. And when we think about the different options for communication, you know, we want to make sure it's able to, the messages we're posting are able to reach diverse audiences. And we talked about this a bit already, but social media platforms, you know, most of the time, a lot of us are engaging on our phones when we look at social media. So we want to make sure that the posts that are being made are mobile friendly. You all outlined this in the chat, but using things like captions with videos, transcripts, using a sign language interpreter, and then simply posting content at a time that's relevant for your time zone. This is something that's a little bit sort of tricky and might take time to play around with and see where you get the most engagement from, whether that's, bright and early in the morning or maybe closer to tea time or lunchtime. But social media is great to sort of experiment a little bit, see what works, and then adapt that for your overall strategy. And on this slide, there are some tips for making your content accessible. One thing that we're going to speak about now is alt text. And this is also known as alt descriptions. And so these are a written copy of an image that can be read if the image doesn't load or if a user is using a screen reader. So alt text can be incredibly important to make sure that the to make sure that the viewer of the social media post is gathering all the information that you intend to share with them. So good alt text gives a concise description of an image in a few sentences. It's really to describe the image itself, not to make any assumptions, but truly just to describe what the image is depicting. And that way, any text displayed on the image as part of your description can be transcribed and read by screen readers so that they can pick it up. So for the example that is on the screen, you'll see there's an image of Greta Thunberg, who's a well-known young climate activist. The text for this social media post says school strike week 142, hashtag mind the gap, hashtag climate strike online, hashtag Fridays for Future, and hashtag face the climate emergency. And so the image, the photo that is posted with the text is a photo of Greta Thunberg herself holding a sign. And so the alt text that is shared is a Twitter post from Greta Thunberg. She is wearing a black sweatshirt and facing forward, holding a sign labeled Swedish words that I cannot read. So I apologize for that. But it's a good example to demonstrate that it's about describing what it is that the image is depicting, right? You have this person, Greta Thunberg. What is she doing? She's holding a sign. Sometimes it is really helpful to describe what the person is wearing so you can have that image in mind. And then importantly, what is the sign? What is written on the sign? So this is just a short example to share how alt text can be really useful for your social media posts, and then also make them more inclusive and accessible for all people to engage with. And maybe, Sarah, if I could hand it over to you, and you can run everyone through maybe a quick alt text exercise.
Sure. So I think all of you are very familiar with these different pieces of accessibility and how to make social media posts accessible, but just as a quick exercise so we can all kind of go through this together, we're going to look at an image that was posted on social media and draft some alt texts together. So I'm going to just describe the photo first, which can help draft can help with deciding what the alt text should be. So we have a picture. This is from one of IFAS's trainings. It's a group of young people who are standing in a circle wearing masks, and they're holding strips of paper that are also, the strips of paper are in a circle as well. So if we needed to create a very concise, maybe 1 or 2 sentence alt text to describe this photo, what would we be able to come up with and add so screen readers can pick up the description? What might you draft for the alt text? And feel free to drop it in the chat or even verbally share it. Any ideas for what we could use for a description, a written description of this image? Yes. I think definitely perhaps this image shows that humanity does bring people together. I really like that. And maybe I gave it away my verbal this description, but I'll show the alt text that I've written down here, which is just simply, again, to be very simple, very concise, and just describing what you see in the image is a group of young people are wearing masks and standing in a circle, holding strips of paper in the shape of a circle as part of a training. It does not have to be very long. In fact, your alt text should not be very long in order for a screen reader to pick it up. And I love these messages that you all are sharing in the chat. I think they would also be great for the tweet itself. You know, if we wanted to write a post to go with this, such as humanity brings people together, to togetherness, we can keep the chain, and maybe include a hashtag. You know, that's another way to create a really creative social media post. So I really like where everyone is going with these ideas. So looking at the next tip that we wanted to share around audience action and engagement. So this can look really different for different advocacy efforts. And just like we've discussed, you might have different goals, you might have different audiences. So your content will change based on that. You might want to be posting videos or photos. You might have a survey. You might have infographics. So it's important to think about your content, and the way we have broken it down on the screen is 3 different purposes of your content. So you might have entertaining content. You might have influencing content, or you might have educating content. And so, or you could use all 3. They're not, you know, exclusive. So thinking about perhaps if you're entertaining, maybe you're having videos, maybe you're showing memes or photos. If you're trying to influence your audience, maybe you're including quotes or infographics. And if you're trying to educate, maybe you're including statistics. Maybe you're including articles or links to different research. So, you know, it's important to think about the purpose of your content and the ideas you would want to engage your audience. I think throughout all the different types of content, some things to keep in mind are that your messages should be easily understood. And we talked about this a little bit with our examples about inclusive communication. We want to make sure our messages are clear and they're not going to be misinterpreted. We want our messages to be honest, credible, and direct. one idea that we talked about through the examples was a call to action, which is telling your audience what action you want them to take. Maybe it's advocating for disability rights. Maybe you're asking the government for something, or elected officials. There's a lot of different ways you can approach your call to action, but it's helpful to have one in your social media posts. It can also be helpful to think about creating or designing content that is impactful and that catches people's eye. So maybe you're including photos, quotes, videos that really appeal to people as they're scrolling through Twitter or they're scrolling through Facebook. But this is really an opportunity to get creative and to explore what maybe works and maybe doesn't work for your audiences. And so I'm curious, does anyone have experience with content that they've seen work really well? Maybe you all have examples of content that was able to engage a lot of people. I'd love to hear some examples from you all. Or maybe you've seen really effective social media content as you scroll through your own social media. Any examples of those?
Hi, Sarah. I'd like to share something or an
Please, go ahead.
example.
Yeah.
I'm just on YouTube, and I came across this short. And okay, it was entertaining, but it really had a powerful message in regards to accessibility. So what it was depicting mainly was there was a lady in a wheelchair trying to access a bank, but the bank had they had stairs, but you could see like bankers in people who are offering these services trying to lure in her into the bank. But now there was a way that they played around it. It looked funny, but it really had an important message that was showing the importance of accessibilities for persons with disabilities, especially on buildings. So that one for me really caught my eye. It's really entertaining, but at the same time very educative.
Thank you for sharing. I think you've hit on a lot of important points, which is, the purpose of our content can be multiple things. It can be entertaining. It can also educate. But, just because we're using entertaining content doesn't mean it's not impactful or important or includes a call to action. I also want to connect what you said with what Jessica wrote in the chat around storytelling. That video sounds like it told a story, and that can really be impactful either through the story of an individual or a group or a community, really connecting, as Jessica is saying, to the cause and to the issue. And I think that that's really impactful. And I'm seeing, and to Lucy's point too, interesting and captivating stories, and that could be a video, but that could also be a photo or an interesting quote, or a statistic that maybe you didn't know, you learned something new, that sticks in your mind. And I'm seeing also a question from Datius, or hopefully I said your name right, apologies, but a question around, if you have entertaining content, how can you change it to influencing and educating? And I think Ashley makes a point in the chat that's important, is they don't have to be exclusive. You could start to post more educational content or influencing content. And on the screen we have, a lot of different ideas for what that content can look like. So it might be that you just start to add news articles. You might start, or you mix news articles with entertaining content. There's a lot of different ways you can do that, and to start changing your content over time, or mixing in new content that is impactful or appealing to people in a different way. So I think what's great about social media is, you can constantly be reshaping your approach and your goals and your causes. And it allows us to continue a conversation over not just a day, but a month or a year or several years as you kind of develop your voice. So a lot of really good points here. Shifting now just to our next tip, but please feel free to continue to chat with all of your points and your reflections. So one way we also approach social media is through what we call a network approach. And it's very simple, and it's probably something many of you are already doing, but we put a name to it, and we wanted to kind of describe it as a way to further connect people to your cause and further expand your community. So, when we think about a network approach, we're thinking about connecting to new networks, which can create a broader and more robust group of advocates. And so the idea is that you continue to connect to new networks and new people, and this can help you get closer to influencing decision makers or elected officials, because the larger your community is and your network is, the more visibility it can have on social media, and the more likely you are to connect to people who might have decision-making power or who might be an elected official or government. So the image on the slide shows how this network approach works in practice. So what we have here is really 2 steps. So starting with your organization, step 1, you will directly engage your stakeholders. So those are people who are already supporting you and already supporting your campaign, through your sharing with them posts and messages, maybe on Facebook, maybe on WhatsApp, maybe on a different social media platform. And so in the image, your organization is connected by 3 orange lines to the public, for example, or to the media and to civil society. So those are the people that you are reaching out to through step 1. So in step 2, the idea is that those stakeholders can amplify your messages and share them with their stakeholders. And this can help expand your network and your reach, and it can more effectively, as we've been saying, influence decision makers. So from, for example, the media, a blue line is connected to ministries. From civil society, it's connected to ministries, and perhaps your members are connecting to elected officials or electoral management bodies. So we're continuing to engage a broader network of people. And so, it's important, for example, to use those different tools at your disposal to amplify your message, maybe a shared hashtag, maybe photos or appealing content. And that can help support this network approach. And, when we think about social media, as with any advocacy campaign, there really is strength in numbers. So having a broader network can show elected leaders, decision makers, that a majority of people feel the same way about a topic. And this could even shift opinions or perspectives with people who may not agree with you. And it may also influence future policy. So it can be very effective. The last tip that we wanted to share was around evaluating your success. And I think this can be often missed, but it's so important, because it's important to stop during your digital advocacy campaigns or your social media outreach and to really think about how effective you are being and what you can improve and what lessons you've learned. So once you've decided your content and maybe how many times you're posting, what your key messages are, you're going to want to think about how successful is your campaign. One way to do this is to regularly look at the number of posts you posted. Maybe you're looking at how many followers you have. Maybe you've increased your number of followers. And also how your community is engaging with your posts. Maybe you're going to look at the number of views on a video or on views on a post, number of likes, number of shares, and this can increase over time. Maybe you see a social media post that you shared has really high number of likes and is very popular, and you can think about why it might be popular. It's also important to look at how people are engaging with your posts through comments or through conversations in groups on social media to see how your cause and how your campaign is being received and perhaps what its impact could be. This can really allow you to continue to reshape your advocacy, to rethink about your content, your goals, and your audiences to be even more effective. And these are just a few ways to do that. So kind of taking this and putting it all together, we wanted to see and go through a very short scenario about how you can apply these tips to your own digital advocacy and your own social media work. So we're going to share a scenario, and we'll also drop it in the chat. So the scenario is, you are a university student and you want to advocate for more accessible buildings on campus for students with disabilities, such as more ramps, single floor buildings, things like that. Facebook is the most popular social media platform used on campus, and you want your campaign to reach as many people as possible. So with that in mind, thinking about your goal of accessible buildings on campus for students with disabilities, thinking about Facebook, thinking about your reach, let's start with the first question, which is, which social media platform would you use for your campaign based on this scenario? And you can drop that in the chat, or you can unmute and share.
Maybe as a follow-up to this question, which social media platform or multiple platforms would you consider using?
Yeah. All right, so I'm seeing Facebook. And based on the scenario, Facebook is the most popular social media platform on campus. Apologies, my cat has joined the conversation. And yes, Facebook, definitely, I think Facebook. And it's possible, for example, you talk to other students and they also want to use WhatsApp, or they also use TikTok. And yeah, to Jessica's point, you read my mind. You could also use TikTok to build content and cross-post it, and especially with different video editing tools. And, you know, you can use other platforms to cross-share. And you can definitely use things like Instagram. Oh, my cat. My cat's name is Trent. Apologies. Working from home. So yeah, so all of these are great points. Yeah, so you can really be creative about what social media platforms you use. And yes, per the scenario, Facebook is definitely the most popular. So then the second question is, how can you make your social media content accessible? So maybe thinking about Facebook accessibility or other social media that you all listed. How can you make it accessible for different audiences?
And think back to some of what we talked about through those earlier examples as well, because those were some great examples of how to make your social media post more accessible.
So Jessica shared something that I actually did not know, which is, I love that I get to, of course, learning from all of you, but you learn something new. TikTok can auto-generate captions. So perhaps if you are creating TikTok videos that go on Facebook, those captions can transfer over, which is kind of cool. I like the closed captions, hashtags, alt text for videos, and then sharing. Yes, definitely. These are all great points. You know, hashtags can make it easier to quickly share a post, and of course, alt text for any images can help with screen readers using or looking at the image. Yeah, so being as inclusive with your communication as possible. One thought too is if you do have a video, including a description of the video as well, is something you could also do. But these are all great answers and certainly make the university students campaign more accessible.
One other thing I might add, and I know we kind of touched on this earlier, but also thinking about how we might engage linguistic minorities through our videos and transcripts. You know, thinking about how to translate those into different languages as well to make them more accessible is something that you could do with your social media posts.
So now thinking about maybe the kind of opportunity to get creative, to do some fun stuff with your advocacy campaign, what type of content would you want to use? Thinking about this scenario, would you want to be educating your campus or your peers? Would you want to be influencing? Would you want to entertain? And why? You know, what do you think would be most effective in this scenario?
Sarah and Ashley, it's Blaze here. I just saw a comment there from Jessica about sharing social media handles and hashtags. I think this is certainly an idea that we could do. And I would actually suggest that people do that through the WIDAR WhatsApp group. That way people could go and look and find those and share. So I can see some other answers coming through there. And also just a reminder, about 10 minutes to go.
Awesome, thank you. So yes, to Jessica's question, I think it sounds like that WhatsApp group is the most effective way of sharing, but it's a great idea. And of course, please feel free to follow our Twitter account at IPIS Youth as well. But hopefully, yes, you can continue to, you know, amplify each other's networks as well. So I'm seeing some answers in the chat to the question around content. I do think there's a lot of opportunities to use accessible content, but I like the idea of kind of educating perhaps around wheelchair use, for example, or entertaining like a video. And I think Saidi is making a good point too. You know, most students maybe would be more engaged by entertainment, maybe memes. So the content should match the audience, which you said far better than I could have said, is absolutely true. Yeah, and so if others have ideas, please feel free to drop them in the chat, but for the interest of time, I'll go on to our next question, which is how you can apply a network approach. And I think this is where you can really also get creative around this scenario. So looking again at the graphic around how to use a network approach, how might you as the university student use a network approach in this scenario? Or maybe we can break it down by step. So who as a university student might you reach out to on social media? So yeah, so you might be reaching out directly to a program director or a department head on your campus. I also think, for example, you probably are connected to other university students, you know, as a university student yourself. Maybe you start by reaching out to your friends. Maybe you have, you know, clubs or student groups exactly that you reach out to start. And that would be your first step of your network approach. The second step would then be those student groups or friends reaching out to other people they know. And that could get to a program head or a department head or another faculty member. And it could reach the president of the university who says, you know what, a lot of students are talking about this. We should think about how to make campus more accessible. So thinking about how your message can continue to expand and have that ripple effect across your community is really important. So I guess the final question that we'll be talking about, or for this scenario, is you as the university student, you've picked your platform, you have accessible, interesting, engaging content, you have a great network of people who have heard about your advocacy campaign. How will you evaluate the success of your campaign? What might you look for to say, yes, my campaign has been successful? Mm-hmm. So you might see actual changes at the university that are more inclusive of students with disabilities. You might see, for example, more ramps or more classes held on the first floor of a building. What might you see on social media that shows that you've been successful?
Yeah, myself, what I would see as something to evaluate. First, I will make sure that I watch on how on the engagement on the post. So I will look on the engagement on the post, how people are liking, how people are commenting on or reacting on the post. So that will first tell me if my will be the first sign to see how my campaign is successful, and also see the number of sharings if there are any. So that will also tell me on how on if my campaign is really successful or not.
Yes, exactly. I think this is often a piece that people leave until the end or in the middle of their campaign. And that makes sense because you're thinking about all these other factors. But I think it's important to stop and as Tia is saying, set goals to begin with. And really make sure it's simple. And Rajab, I think you made some good points. It might be who's sharing my posts. How many people are liking it? If I have a Facebook group, for example, how many followers are we seeing growth? How many reposts or comments, as Tia was sharing here. So I think it's really up to you as the advocate. I think it could be hard, as Dan is saying, like to put kind of a standard number on something and to make sure things are realistic. But I think it can help to say, okay, where are we starting? What is our baseline? Let's say your Facebook group is brand new, so 0 followers, and you want to grow by 100 people in the first month. And if that seems like a very easy goal to surpass, you might double it. So I think it's constantly stopping and reflecting and learning from the work you're doing, and to see, you know, what might, and then talking to people. That's the beauty of, and to wrap up, you know, that is the beauty of sessions like this and communities like this, to talk and say, well, what are you seeing as working? What are you seeing as successful? What's not successful? And learning from one another and building such a strong and vibrant community through digital spaces, which our digital advocacy allows us to do. So I think I'll wrap there, and thank you all. You know, digital advocacy and social media is such a big part, I think, of our lives, and we hope that you can continue to connect and work through it. And we are really excited to see your advocacy efforts moving forward. So I'll pass it back to Blaise, but thank you so much. And it's been a wonderful session.
Thank you, Sarah and Ashley. Yes, I agree. Fantastic, and so much engagement from our participants as well. Just on that last point on impact and evaluating impact, I think that this discussion is really great in terms of identifying what that looks like through the social media platform. I think there's another piece which also looks at how social media is contributing to your broader advocacy campaign and target. And I think often we either look at the maybe more detailed engagements on social media itself, and then the only other factor of success is the big win at the end of the campaign. I think it's also interesting to look at how social media is contributing to progress through the rest of the campaign, to ensure that it's playing its part along with other advocacy tools that you might be using along the way. So really great to be able to have this insight into the use of social media here, and also some really great examples and things to think through about the use of social media when you're doing advocacy. I think that a lot of people say, yes, let's put it on social media, but maybe there isn't the kind of analysis and strategy and thinking that Ashley and Sarah have talked about here before people really commit time into doing that. So great to have this insight, and again, a big thanks to both of you and IFES for the support in this series. Okay, as per usual, we will make available the recording of this session and the materials through the WIDAR website, which is youth-disability.org. That's youth-disability.org. Maybe I could ask Dan just to put that link back into the chat so everyone has it there. We've also discussed the ongoing WhatsApp group, which I think as well Dan has put into the chat as well. So in case you are not already in that chat, please do access it, and also access the website to get the information about all of the previous sessions in this program and many other resources and tools there as well. I would, just before we finish, like to also mention we do have two other upcoming sessions on this series coming up in the next few weeks. On the 21st of September, we will have a session looking at advocacy relating to inclusivity in sport and football. So looking at examples of projects and campaigns calling for better access and inclusivity in sport for persons with disabilities. And this will be hosted by our partner at the UEFA Foundation. So there'll be a key focus on football, but in fact, they will be bringing people from two of the projects that they support, which is through their program at UEFA Foundation, to really look at the inclusivity and sport topic, which I know is one that we've been wanting to include in this series right along. So please look for the promotional material on that on 21st of September. That is the advocacy for inclusivity in sport and football. And then the next session after that will be in October, and we'll look at youth, disability rights, and transport, and specifically looking at inclusive and safe accessibility to transport in many of the countries in which we work and live. And so that will be hosted by yours, which is the Youth for Road Safety Coalition. And they have a number of different toolkits and guides which focus on the way in which young people can really advocate and call for more safe and accessible transport systems in the communities in which we live. So they're the next two upcoming, one looking at sport and one looking at transport, both of course focusing on youth and disability as a central focus. So please look for those on the WIDAR website, through the WhatsApp group, and of course through social media. So with that, let me again say a big thanks to Ashley Law and Sarah Timrek from the International Foundation for Electoral Systems for their time today. And of course, a huge thanks to all of our participants. Really fantastic, again, to have you all here. We look forward to seeing you next time. And for now, we'll say a big thank you and goodbye.